I was standing on my son's porch on Christmas Eve, holding the little sweaters I spent all month crocheting for my grandbabies, when the door finally opened, and my daughter-in-law, Ellie, stepped out, blocking the entrance with a glass of champagne in her hand. She didn't smile. She didn't ask why I was there. She didn't even say hello. She just looked me up and down and whispered, loud enough for the whole party behind her to hear, "Tonight is family only. You weren't supposed to come." Laughter spilled out from inside. Music, warm lights, the smell of roasted turkey drifts through the doorway. My son saw me standing there and looked away the moment Ellie squeezed his hand. Then she added, with that cold little smirk she saves just for me, "She always shows up uninvited." And the door closed in my face. Snow cracked under my shoes as I turned back toward my car. Not because of the cold, but because of the truth that had just been handed to me. I was no longer considered family. But there was one thing Ellie didn't know, one thing she never imagined. This Christmas would not end the way she planned. Christmas Eve is supposed to be the warmest night of the year, no matter how cold the weather is outside. At least, that's what I used to believe. But standing on that porch, holding those tiny handmade sweaters while snowflakes melted on my gloves, I realized warmth only exists where you are wanted. When Ellie shut the door in my face, the sound echoed through my chest like a punch I never saw coming. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was soft, almost polite. But sometimes the quietest moments are the ones that break you the most. For a few seconds, I stood there frozen, literally and figuratively, staring at the wreath hanging on the door. Gold ribbon, silver bells, a little sign that read, "Joy to the world." Joy. Except not for me. Behind that door, I could still hear the clinking of glasses, the chatter, the music. Someone turned up Mariah Carey. Someone else shouted, "Dinner's ready." I even heard my grandson's laughter, high, sweet, the kind of sound that used to make my whole week better. But none of it was for me. Not this year. The wind carried the smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey toward me, teasing me with a holiday I was no longer allowed to be part of. It hit me then. I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. My fingers tightened around the gift bag, red and gold decorated with little felt snowmen the kids loved touching. Inside were the sweaters I made for them. I stitched every loop while watching Christmas movies alone at night, whispering their names under my breath like a prayer. I wanted to leave those gifts on the porch. I wanted to prove to myself that I was still a good mother, a good grandmother. But the thought of Ellie opening the door later, picking up my bag with her manicured fingers, laughing about it with her friends, that was too much humiliation even for me. So I turned away. The snow cracked beneath my shoes, each step sounding like a tiny betrayal. I felt the cold creep up my legs, through my coat, into my bones, but none of it compared to the chill Ellie's words left inside me. Tonight is family only. Family only. Family only. Family only. The phrase looped in my head like a cruel Christmas jingle that refused to stop. And every time I heard it, the weight of it grew heavier. When did I stop being family? Was it when my husband died? Was it when I retired and stopped being useful? Was it when Ellie decided she wanted to manage every part of my son's life, including who he loved and who he allowed to love him? I reached my car, opened the door with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and sat inside for a moment. The heater hadn't kicked in yet, so each breath left a small cloud in front of me. I wiped my face, not sure whether it was snow or tears. Then something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. Sharp, clean, undeniable clarity. If they didn't want me in their Christmas, they didn't deserve me in it. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. An older woman, tired, disappointed, but not defeated. Not this time. That's when my hand reached for my phone, almost on its own. My thumb hovered for just a second over a number I hadn't dialed in months. Marcus, my late husband's closest friend. A man who knew the truth behind every asset, every document, every detail of the life my husband left behind. A man who once told me, "Call me when you're ready to stop tolerating disrespect." I pressed the call button. He picked up on the first ring. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady, warm, exactly the opposite of what I had just walked away from. I took a breath, a long one. Then I said the words I should have said years ago. "Marcus, bring the folder. We're doing this tonight." There was a pause, not of surprise, of satisfaction. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I hung up, I didn't feel cold anymore. Not from the snow, not from the door slamming in my face, because for the first time in a long time, I felt the temperature of my own power rising. And Christmas? Oh, Christmas was far from over. Driving away from my son's house, the Christmas lights reflected in my windshield like little reminders of everything I lost. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need any more noise. The silence was loud enough. As I drove, I couldn't help thinking about how different things used to be. Back when Christmas meant something to our family. Back when my husband, Robert, was still alive. Robert loved holidays. Loved them so much he'd start planning the Christmas menu in October. He'd spend hours wrapping gifts with too much tape, humming old Motown songs, telling our son Daniel that family comes first, always. Now look at us, a family in name only. I pulled into my driveway, the porch light glowing faintly on the house Robert and I bought together 40 years ago. A house that held every version of our son, his first steps, his first bike ride, his high school graduation, the night he came home shaking because he totaled his first car. I stayed up with him until sunrise, holding his hand, telling him the world wasn't ending. Funny. How children forget the hands that held them. I parked the car but didn't get out immediately. I let my mind drift to all the ways I had been showing up for my son long before Ellie ever appeared. When he and Ellie had their first child, I practically moved into their house for 6 months to help. I cooked, cleaned, stayed up for late-night feedings, drove them to doctor's appointments with no complaints. When Ellie wanted to start her online business, I offered them money, quietly, privately, so Daniel wouldn't feel pressured. When their second baby came early, I paid the hospital bill that insurance didn't cover. 12 years of sacrifices. 12 years of saying yes, even when I was exhausted, lonely, grieving. I never asked for anything back. Just respect. Just a seat at the table. Just a place in their lives. But tonight proved that even that was asking too much. My hands were still trembling when I finally stepped inside my house. I walked straight to the kitchen, turned on the kettle out of habit, then turned it off again. I didn't want tea. I wanted strength. I walked into Robert's old study, kept exactly the way he left it. The leather chair. The framed photos of our son through the years. The wooden shelf was filled with the books Robert loved but never finished. And on that shelf, the black binder. The binder Robert gave me 2 weeks before he died. He placed it in my hands, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Use this only when you're tired of being too kind." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. He had always told me I forgave too quickly, trusted too easily, and put others before myself, even when they didn't deserve it. And maybe he saw something I didn't. Maybe he saw this night coming long before I did. I opened the binder and saw the documents Marcus helped Robert prepare years ago. Trust accounts, property deeds, investments, and protections I had never bothered to touch. Robert wasn't just a loving husband, he was a man who knew how cruel the world could be. And he made sure I wouldn't drown in it. My phone buzzed. "Marcus, I'm outside." I took a deep breath, grabbed the binder, and walked to the door. When I opened it, Marcus was standing there with snow in his beard and a briefcase in his hand. He looked at me, really looked at me, and understood everything without a single word. "They hurt you again," he said gently. I nodded. "And now," I replied, "I'm done pretending it's okay." Marcus stepped inside, set his briefcase on the table, and opened it with a soft click. rows of documents, legal files, plans we never had to use, until tonight. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. So I did, every word, every detail. When I finished, he didn't pity me. He didn't offer empty comfort. He simply said, "Then let's make sure this never happens to you again." For the first time all night, I felt the ground under my feet again, solid, steady. Christmas might have shut me out, but I was not going to spend the rest of my life standing on anyone's porch waiting to be let in. This time, I was choosing myself. I first met Ellie on a warm Sunday afternoon, long before the snow and the bitterness of this Christmas. Daniel had called me earlier that week, excitement bouncing in his voice the way it used to when he was 10 years old and wanted to show me a school project. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." Special. I remember smiling at that word. Back then, it still meant something. I spent the whole morning preparing, straightened the throw pillows, baked Robert's favorite lemon pound cake, and even brought out the good china. I wanted everything to feel welcoming. I wanted Daniel to know his mother still cared about the life he was building. When they finally arrived, Daniel looked nervous in a way I hadn't seen before. And Ellie. She walked in with a confidence that filled the room before her voice ever did. She wore a cream-colored blouse and a diamond bracelet that glittered every time she moved her wrist. Her smile was perfect, too perfect, the kind sculpted for photos rather than real affection. But it was her eyes that caught my attention, not because they were beautiful, though they were, but because they moved everywhere except to me. She looked at the chandelier. She looked at the framed family portraits. She looked at the hardwood floors Robert installed by hand. She looked at the house as if she were studying it, appraising it. And then she looked at Daniel. That's when she finally smiled. We all sat down for cake, and she offered the kind of small talk people use when they're trying to sound polite without revealing anything real. "Oh, what a lovely home," she said lightly, running her fingers over the arm of the sofa. "You must have spent a lot keeping a place this size in good shape." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Curious, calculating, like she was gathering information. I brushed it off at the time. I told myself I was being dramatic. After all, she was the woman my son loved. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. But as the afternoon went on, little details kept tugging at me. The way she lifted her chin when I offered her more cake, as if accepting kindness was beneath her. The way she steered every conversation back to herself, her job, her dreams, the kind of life she wanted. The way she asked Daniel what the house was worth, right in front of me in a tone that suggested she wasn't joking. Daniel laughed it off. I didn't. At one point, she excused herself to use the bathroom. Daniel followed her with his eyes, soft and tender, clearly in love. And seeing that look broke something inside me, not from jealousy, but from fear. Fear that he was blinded by something he didn't understand yet. Fear that she saw him not as a partner, but as a doorway. I stood in the hallway when Ellie came out of the bathroom, and for the first time we were face to face without Daniel watching. Her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The pleasant mask slipped for half a heartbeat. She glanced at me, then at the wedding portrait of Robert and me hanging on the wall. Her gaze lingered on the gold frame, then on my ring finger, then back to my eyes. And she smiled. But this smile was nothing like the one she gave Daniel. This one was sharp, knowing, possessive. "I can see where Daniel gets his loyalty," she said. It sounded like a compliment, but behind the tone, I heard something else, a warning. When they left that day, Daniel hugged me tight. He smelled like hope and new beginnings. Ellie gave me a quick, polite kiss on the cheek, barely touching my skin. As they walked down the driveway, I felt something twist in my chest. A strange, heavy feeling, a whisper I tried to ignore. She's going to change everything, and she did. Piece by piece, month by month, smile by smile, until the woman who once walked into my home with curiosity became the same woman who slammed a Christmas door in my face. If I'm honest, the door closing in my face on Christmas Eve didn't come out of nowhere. It was just the final blow in a long, quiet war Ellie had been fighting against me. One smile, one comment, one boundary at a time. It started small. It always starts small. The first Christmas after Daniel married her, I noticed I wasn't asked to help decorate the tree. It was something Daniel and I did every year, listening to old gospel Christmas songs, hanging ornaments he made in kindergarten, arguing over whether the angel should be tilted left or right. That year, Ellie announced lightly, Daniel and I want our own traditions now. And just like that, I was out of the living room and into the kitchen, cooking alone. Next came birthdays. Daniel had always insisted I bake his cake, lemon with cream cheese frosting. But the year Ellie turned 30, she told me, "Oh, don't worry about bringing anything. We've got a caterer." I still baked the cake, hoping she'd appreciate the gesture. She smiled politely, set it aside, and served the catered one instead. I found my cake in the fridge the next day, untouched. Then came the seating arrangements. At Thanksgiving, Ellie seated me at the far end of the table, next to the toddlers, while her parents sat beside Daniel. She called it managing space, but I knew better. I was being moved out of the picture inch by inch. It didn't stop there. There were the sudden new rules for visiting. Please text before you come, for the kids' schedule. We're limiting sugar for the kids, so maybe don't bring treats. They're learning independence, so no hugs when they're upset. No hugs from their own grandmother. Each line felt like a thread being snipped from a quilt I'd been sewing for decades. I tried to talk to Daniel about it. I tried so many times, but every time I brought up how Ellie treated me, he'd sigh like I was a burden, not angry, just tired. "Mom, you're reading too much into things. Ellie's just particular. Don't take it personally." Don't take it personally. Everything was personal. The real shift came after I helped them financially. When Ellie's business started failing, I stepped in, quietly, to avoid embarrassing her. I thought helping would bring us closer. Instead, it gave her more leverage to twist things. Suddenly, anytime I visited, she'd make comments like, "Oh, that looks expensive. I guess it must be nice to spend freely when you're retired." Some people just don't understand what real work-life balance is. Daniel and I want to raise the kids differently, healthier, emotionally stable. The implication was clear. They needed protection from my influence. Every time I left that house, I felt a little smaller. The worst moment came that summer at my grandson's preschool performance. I arrived early wearing my Sunday best, excited like any grandmother would be. Ellie pulled me aside before the show and said, "Try not to overwhelm him today, okay? Too many hugs, too many pictures. It makes us look old-fashioned." Old-fashioned. As if love had an expiration date. Later, when I waved at my grandson from the front row, Ellie gently grabbed his shoulder and said, "Wave to Mommy first, sweetheart." He looked confused, and that confused look broke my heart more than anything Ellie ever said. That night, I cried for the first time in years, not because of Ellie, but because I finally understood. She wasn't trying to share Daniel with me. She was trying to erase me from him. One holiday at a time, one visit at a time, one rule at a time. So when she slammed that door in my face on Christmas Eve, it wasn't the beginning of our conflict. It was the end of the illusion that things would ever get better. It was the moment I realized I had spent years shrinking myself for people who would never make space for me, and if they weren't going to make space, I would make my own. Marcus and I sat across from each other at my kitchen table, the same table where Robert once planned our entire future, the same table where I dreamt I'd one day host my grandchildren for Sunday breakfasts. Tonight, it felt more like a war room. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents thick enough to make my stomach tighten. "Before we go any further," he said gently, "you need to see what's been happening behind the scenes." He slid the first folder toward me. My hands hesitated. I already knew it would hurt. But I also knew the truth had lived in the shadows too long. Inside were credit card statements. Not mine, not Daniel's, Ellie's. Multiple cards, all maxed out, $7,400, $13,800, and $29,000. I blinked. The numbers didn't even look real at first. "She's drowning in debt," Marcus said quietly. "She's been opening new cards to pay off old ones." I swallowed hard. The image of her smiling in that sequined Christmas dress flashed in my mind, a smile polished enough to hide an entire financial disaster. Marcus laid out the next set of papers, business tax reports, profit and loss statements, all steeped in red ink. "Her online business," he explained. "It's been failing for 3 years. She hid it from Daniel by running the account separately under her maiden name." My heart sank. Daniel, my sweet boy, had no clue. "But why drag me into it?" I whispered. "Why freeze me out? Why treat me like a threat?" Marcus exchanged a look with me, steady, heavy, deliberate. Then he placed a legal document on the table, a printed government form, a guardianship petition. My breath caught. "She was preparing to file this," he said. "It's a request to declare you mentally incapable of handling your own finances." I felt the blood drain from my face. Guardianship. That meant taking control of my accounts, my properties, my medical decisions, my entire life. Marcus continued gently. "Her plan was simple. Once you're declared incapacitated, Daniel would be pressured to take control of your estate, which Ellie would effectively manage." A chill crept up my arms. She wasn't just pushing me out of the family emotionally. She was trying to lock me out legally. Marcus tapped the last document, a printout of text messages between Ellie and her parents. I didn't want to read them, but I had to. "She's alone now. Easy to influence. Once we get her signature, everything will stabilize. Daniel trusts me. He won't question anything. Just keep her busy with the grandkids until we finish the paperwork." And the final one, dated just 3 weeks before Christmas. "If she resists, we'll push the confusion angle. She's old. It won't be hard." My chest tightened so hard it hurt. It didn't care. It wasn't a concern. It was a coordinated plan to strip me of autonomy, dignity, and everything Robert and I had worked for. Marcus watched me quietly. "You're not imagining things," he said. "You were being isolated on purpose." I looked down at my hands that raised Daniel, held him through heartbreaks, cooked for him, and worked 2 jobs to put him through college. Hands that once braided his hair when he was little and scared of thunderstorms. Those hands were now the target of someone who wanted to make me powerless. I closed the folder slowly. There was grief. There was betrayal. But beneath all of it, there was something else rising, a heat I hadn't felt in years, a resolve that felt like Robert whispering through the walls of this house. "Stand up, protect what's yours." I lifted my chin. "What do we need to do next?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "We gather everything. We secure your assets. And then..." He leaned forward, voice low, controlled. "We show them you're not the one to be underestimated." And for the first time that night, I felt the stirrings of something Ellie never expected from me. Power. A week before Christmas, Daniel called to say they wanted to have an early family dinner. His voice sounded rehearsed, tight, too careful. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked through their front door. Ellie's parents were already there, sitting stiffly on the couch, dressed like they were attending a business meeting, not a family gathering. Ellie hovered behind them, smiling the way people do when they're preparing bad news and want to soften the blow. Daniel hugged me briefly, but even that hug felt off, as if he were torn between 2 loyalties and losing the battle to the louder one. Ellie clapped her hands together. "Let's sit, shall we?" I sat in the only empty chair, noticeably lower than the others. Ellie stood, which meant she towered over me the entire time, a psychological detail I'm sure she enjoyed. Her mother cleared her throat first, a gentle act, but her eyes were sharp. "We've been concerned," she began. "Daniel tells us you've been forgetful lately." Forgetful? I blinked. Before I could respond, Ellie slid a sympathetic smile across her face, the kind you use on a child. "It's normal at your age," she added softly. "We just want what's best for you." Then Daniel spoke, hesitant, slow, reading from some emotional script Ellie probably practiced with him. "Mom, maybe it's time we help you manage things, just to take some pressure off you." My heart sank. This wasn't dinner. This was an ambush. Ellie's father reached into a leather folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "All we need," he said matter-of-factly, "is your signature on these. They give Daniel temporary authority to help with your finances and decisions." Temporary. I had read Marcus's documents. There was nothing temporary about it. I looked at Daniel. He couldn't meet my eyes. Ellie stepped closer, placing both hands on the back of his chair like she was anchoring him. "You've been under so much stress," she murmured. "Letting us manage things would let you finally relax." Relax. In their hands. The air tightened around me. It felt like everyone else in the room had rehearsed this moment. Ellie's mother chimed in again. "It's for your own safety. You wouldn't want to make mistakes and put yourself at risk." Ellie added, "You almost forgot the kids' recital last month." I hadn't forgotten. Ellie had changed the time without telling me. Then Ellie went for the kill shot, the line designed to break my resistance. "We're not taking anything from you. We're protecting you. Think of how Robert would want you taken care of." They brought up my husband, the man who trusted me completely, the man who left me everything because he believed I could manage it. That was the moment I stopped listening. I heard my own pulse instead, and beneath it, the murmur of something sharper than heartbreak. Clarity. Ellie moved beside me, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "If you sign tonight, we can all enjoy Christmas without tension." Without tension. She wanted me to be silent, small, obedient. I looked up at her, and for the first time I really saw her. Not the polished smile, not the curated outfits, not the rehearsed kindness, but the ambition, the greed, the entitlement. She didn't want a mother-in-law, she wanted a pathway. I straightened my back. "No," I said quietly. Daniel flinched. Ellie blinked, her mask slipping for a moment. "Mom." I said no. Ellie's father leaned forward. "If you refuse now, we may have to pursue this through legal channels." I held his gaze, steady, unmoving. "Then do it." The room fell silent. Ellie stepped back, expression darkening just slightly. She hadn't expected resistance, but she didn't know something crucial. I already had Marcus. I already had the binder. And Robert had prepared me for this long before she ever entered our lives. They spent the rest of the dinner pretending everything was fine. I didn't touch my food. I went home early. And the second I closed my front door, I said out loud, to the empty house, to myself, to Robert's memory, "It ends now." That night, Marcus and I began planning not just to protect me, but to show Ellie and her entire family exactly who they were dealing with. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because I couldn't sleep, but because something inside me had finally woken up. For years, I had moved gently through life, believing kindness would shield me from cruelty. But Ellie had taught me something new. Kindness means nothing to people who see it as weakness. Marcus arrived just after 8 a.m., a thermos of black coffee in one hand and a stack of folders under his arm. His expression was focused, the way a surgeon looks before a complicated operation. "We're securing everything today," he said as he spread the files across my dining table. One by one, he laid out the steps. Move all accounts into a private trust, solely in my name. He slid the documents to me. This keeps them from accessing anything, even if they try to file guardianship again. I signed. The pen felt heavier than usual, but in a good way. Like every signature, he grounded me a little more, transfer property deeds into protected status, every house, every piece of land that Robert and I ever owned. Marcus tapped the papers. They can't touch these now, not legally, not morally, not even by accident. Cancel every financial support I had been giving Daniel's family. For years, I had been paying their daycare costs, school fees, car repairs, medical bills, mortgage supplements, holiday expenses. 12 years of silent generosity, 12 years of keeping them afloat while being treated like a burden. Marcus handed me a printed summary. Total support provided $436,700. I stared at the number, so much sacrifice, so much love, and yet the return was cruelty. I picked up the phone. First, I called the bank. Stop all recurring payments from my accounts. Then the daycare. Daniel and Ellie will handle their own tuition from now on. Then the car insurance. Remove my name from their policy. Every call was a cut, not to them, but to the rope that had been binding me to their disrespect. And with each cut, I felt lighter. Marcus watched me quietly, nodding. "You're taking your life back," he said. I didn't realize I had lost it until I started reclaiming it. Rewrite the will. This part was painful, not because of Ellie, but because of Daniel. Marcus placed the new will in front of me. "You're not disinheriting him," he clarified softly. "You're protecting yourself until he can see the truth." I nodded slowly. Daniel wasn't evil. Daniel was lost, drowning in Ellie's manipulation, too gentle, too trusting, just like me once upon a time. But I couldn't let his blindness cost me everything. I initialed every page, signed every line, install security measures. Marcus helped me. Change the locks, add outdoor cameras, put a security code on the gate, restrict access to anyone not explicitly allowed, no more unannounced visits, no more surprise confrontations, more vulnerability. The home Robert built for us was finally protected again. Prepare documentation for defense. Marcus assembled a binder, thicker than the one Robert left me. Inside were screenshots of Ellie's messages about pushing the confusion angle, records of financial support I'd given, medical evaluations confirming I was fully competent, statements from neighbors and church friends, copies of every financial transfer Ellie had tried to conceal. It wasn't revenge, it was true. Organized, documented, undeniable. When Marcus finished, he closed the binder with a soft click. "If they try anything again," he said, "we'll be ready, more ready than they could ever imagine." I stood by the window watching cars pass by, the winter sun barely breaking through the clouds, for the first time in months, maybe years. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, control. Not over others, not over outcomes, but over myself. I turned to Marcus. "This Christmas," I said quietly, "I'm celebrating with people who actually want me there." Marcus smiled. "Good," he said, "because the next move is yours, and it's going to hit them harder than anything they planned." And he was right, because while Ellie was busy building her little kingdom of manipulation, I was preparing to open the doors of a $7 million mansion for everyone she thought I didn't have, and not a single person on her guest list would forget the woman she tried to erase. Christmas Day arrived crisp and bright, sunlight glinting off the frozen sidewalks. Ellie's house looked like a magazine cover. White icicle lights, giant red bows on the porch railings, a 12-foot tree shining proudly through the window. Cars lined the street. Guests laughed as they stepped inside, arms full of gifts and desserts. It was the perfect setting for the perfect family Christmas. At least, that's what Ellie thought. I pulled up slowly in my dark red SUV, a car Ellie never bothered to ask how I afforded. Marcus parked behind me, stepping out in a charcoal overcoat carrying the binder. A second car followed. A notary public I hired, briefcase in hand, and a third, a discreet photographer to document everything. Not revenge, evidence. When I walked toward the house, my heels clicked against the icy pavement, steady, deliberate, each step cutting through the cold air like a warning. Inside, someone shouted, "Ellie, more guests!" She rushed forward, arms wide, expecting friends from her work group. But when she saw me, her smile died mid-air. The room behind her quieted as if someone had dimmed the sound. "You," she breathed. "Why are you here?" I stepped closer, calm as snowfall. "To wish my family a Merry Christmas." Her jaw tightened. "We already talked about this. Today is our Christmas. Private. You weren't invited." Marcus moved beside me like a silent wall of authority. "She's here on her own business," he said smoothly. Ellie's eyes darted to the notary, then the photographer. Panic flickered. Good. For once she could feel the instability she'd been feeding me for years. Guests began whispering. "Is that Daniel's mom? What's going on? Why is there a notary?" Daniel emerged from the dining room, pale and confused. "Mom, why did you bring—" I held up a hand, stopping him with a gesture so gentle it cut deeper than anger. "Sit, Daniel." He obeyed, not out of fear, but out of something older, something he hadn't felt in a long time, his mother's authority. Ellie forced a laugh. "Everyone. It's just a misunderstanding. She gets confused sometimes." Marcus stepped forward. "No, she doesn't." He opened the binder on the marble kitchen island, papers spread out neatly, every document prepared, every signature needed, every protection activated. I took a breath, lifting my chin. I came here today to make an announcement. The room went still. For 12 years, I have supported this household quietly, financially, emotionally, even when I was pushed aside. I turned to Daniel. "I never told you because I wanted you to build your own life without feeling indebted. But since your wife has chosen to turn my generosity into leverage—" I let the words settle. Ellie's face drained of color. "I am ending all financial support effective immediately." A collective gasp spread across the room. Ellie sputtered, You can't just—" "I already did." The notary nodded, lifting a stamped document. I pointed to it. "Every recurring payment, every loan, every tuition transfer, every bill I have covered for this family is now terminated." Daniel blinked, stunned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Marcus slid forward a printed ledger, the 12-year summary. He read aloud, "Total support provided by your mother, $436,700. Daniel's eyes widened. Guests murmured. Ellie's parents stiffened. I continued, voice steady. "And from this moment on, this household will take responsibility for itself." Ellie stepped forward, trembling with anger. "This is humiliating. You're doing this in front of everyone on Christmas? How dare you—" I met her rage with calm. "You shut a door on me yesterday, Ellie." Silence. "Today, I open one for myself." Her mouth fell open. I wasn't finished. "Furthermore, all my properties and assets have been moved into a protected trust. Neither you nor anyone in your family will have any say over my affairs." Marcus added, "Attempts to file guardianship or claim incompetency will be met with legal action. Evidence has been documented." Ellie's voice broke. "Daniel, say something." Daniel stared at her, really stared, as if seeing her for the first time without the fog she'd wrapped around him for years. His voice shook. "You told me Mom was losing her memory." Her eyes darted wildly. "She is. Sometimes she—" He cut her off. "No, you lied about everything." The room was silent except for Ellie's ragged breathing. I took one step back, giving myself distance from the chaos. I won't stay in homes where I'm unwelcome. I won't support people who tear me down, and I won't let anyone erase me. Not as a mother, not as a woman, not as a human being. Guests watched with wide, stunned eyes. Some nodded quietly, others whispered in sympathy. I turned toward the door. The same kind of door Ellie once slammed in my face, but this time I opened it myself. Before stepping out, I said one final thing. Clear, cold, undeniable. Merry Christmas. Spend it rebuilding the mess you made." And I left, not as a victim, but as a woman who reclaimed her power. The moment I walked out of that house, the winter air hit me like freedom. But behind me, inside those decorated walls, chaos erupted. I didn't need to turn around to hear it. Voices rising, chairs scraping, the kind of shouting that only happens when the truth finally forces its way into a room full of lies. Daniel's voice was the first to crack through the noise. "Ellie, did you know about this? $400,000? Why didn't you tell me my own mother supported us?" Ellie fired back immediately, too quickly. I didn't think she'd mind. She's retired. She doesn't need that money like we do." Her words traveled through the open doorway and froze the air around me. I paused on the porch steps just long enough to hear Daniel respond, anger shaking through his usually calm voice. "That's not your decision to make. This is my mother, and you lied to me, again." Inside, someone gasped. Someone whispered, "I knew something was off." Someone else said, "All this time she acted like the victim." Ellie's parents rushed toward Daniel, trying to spin the situation. Her father's stern voice carried through the entryway. "Son, your mother is overreacting. This is a misunderstanding." Daniel snapped, a sound I had never heard from him. "You ambushed her last week. You brought paperwork to strip her of her rights, and you told Ellie to push the confusion angle, didn't you?" A beat of dead silence followed. Then Ellie screamed. Not the sharp, powerful kind, but the high, cracking kind people let out when the truth traps them with no room left to run. "She was going to ruin Christmas. She was always in our business. She makes everything about herself." Her voice broke on the last sentence, desperate, shrill. That was when the photographer I hired, quiet, nearly invisible until that moment, calmly stepped forward and took a picture of all of them. The flash lit up the room like lightning. Ellie shrieked, "Why are you taking photos? This is private." Marcus, still inside but standing near the door, replied coolly, "Ma'am, this is documentation. You attempted to declare a fully competent woman incapacitated for financial gain. That is not private." Guests murmured, stunned. A woman, one of Ellie's friends, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Ellie, oh my God, what did you do?" Ellie looked around the room, searching for an ally. There were none. Her parents looked betrayed. Guests looked disgusted. Daniel looked devastated. And then, something inside him seemed to break. He sank into a chair and put his face in his hands. "I let you isolate me from my own mother. I believed every word you told me." Ellie rushed to him, grabbing his arms. "Daniel, please, you have to listen. I was doing it for us." He pulled away like her touch burned. "For us? Or for you?" Ellie stumbled backward. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, but everywhere she looked, she saw truth reflected at her. No more manipulation, no more convenient stories, no more control, just consequences. Her voice shook as she screamed toward the doorway where I once stood. "You ruined everything. Are you happy now? Are you proud of yourself?" If she expected me to walk back in, she was disappointed. Marcus answered for me. "She didn't ruin anything. Your actions did." Ellie's mother sat down heavily, covering her face. Her father stared into space, shocked. Guests began picking up their coats, whispering apologies to Daniel, avoiding Ellie like she carried a virus. Within minutes, the glamorous Christmas party Ellie had planned for weeks fell apart like a house built on wet sand. And she stood in the middle of it all, mascara streaking down her cheeks, hair askew, breathing hard. Not like a villain caught red-handed, but like someone who finally realized the world was no longer bending around her illusions. Her voice cracked one last time. "Daniel, please." He didn't answer. He didn't move. He didn't look at her. Instead, he whispered the words that sealed everything. "I need space. From you. from all of this. It was over. Not legally. That part would come soon. Not financially. That damage was already done. But emotionally, the spell she had wrapped around him for years shattered in a single night. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel finally saw the truth. In the days following the Christmas disaster, my phone didn't ring once. Not from Daniel, not from Ellie, not from her parents. It was the quietest holiday season I'd had in years, and strangely, the calmest. But calm never lasts long when someone like Ellie is scrambling to save face. Just 3 days after Christmas, I received a letter, a formal one, stiff paper, heavy envelope, law firm branding in the top corner. Marcus was already pouring himself coffee when I handed it to him. He opened it, skimmed the first page, and let out a long exhale that wasn't quite a sigh, more like confirmation. "She filed for guardianship anyway," he said. Of course she did. When manipulation fails, people like Ellie turn to force. The petition claimed I was exhibiting memory lapses, confused about dates, unable to manage finances, emotionally unstable, a danger to myself due to cognitive decline. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because the desperation practically screamed from the page. Marcus placed the letter on the table and looked at me with a steady calm. She made a mistake. "Which one?" I asked dryly. "All of them." The investigation begins within a week. A social worker was assigned to conduct a wellness check. A young woman named Ms. Lamont stopped by unannounced. I welcomed her in with fresh coffee and a notepad. My notepad filled with neatly written reminders, budgets, and grocery lists. She asked me questions. I answered calmly. She asked me to remember dates. I recited them with accuracy. She asked where my husband's birth certificate was. I walked her straight to the filing cabinet, third drawer, labeled folder. She blinked at me, impressed. Before leaving, she said quietly, "I don't know who filed this, but nothing here supports incompetence." I smiled gently. "I know exactly who filed it." Ellie's downfall accelerates. A week later, Daniel showed up at my door, thinner, pale, exhausted. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since Christmas. "Mom," he began, voice trembling, did she really try to do all this?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I handed him the binder Marcus created. The screenshots, the text messages, the debt, the red flags Ellie couldn't hide anymore. Daniel opened it. His face fell in stages: confusion, disbelief, horror. "I didn't know," he whispered. "She told me you were forgetting things. She said you were lonely and imagining things. She said she was worried about you." I put a hand on his shoulder. "She wasn't worried about me, baby. She was worried about losing control." Daniel covered his face with both hands. "I'm sorry," he choked. "I let her distance me from you. I let her speak for me. I let her decide everything." For the first time in years, Daniel cried like he did when he was a boy, and I held him, not out of pity, but out of the love Ellie had tried so hard to erase. Court day. Ellie arrived with her parents and an attorney who looked like he'd been paid in panic rather than money. When the judge asked for evidence of my declining mental state, Ellie's lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Well, the family has noticed," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "We have medical evaluations from 2 independent physicians confirming Ms. Miller is fully competent." The judge nodded. Ellie's attorney tried again. "There have been incidents of forgetfulness." Marcus stood. "We also have camera footage from December 24th showing Ms. Miller fully aware, articulate, and lucid, even while being verbally dismissed by the petitioners." The judge raised an eyebrow. Ellie stiffened. Marcus continued. "Additionally, here are documented statements from neighbors, church members, and long-term acquaintances confirming her independence and clarity." He placed a thick stack on the table. Ellie's attorney sank a little, but Marcus wasn't done. Finally, Your Honor, we present evidence of financial motive, including the petitioner's debt records, text messages discussing strategies to deem Ms. Miller confused, and coordinated attempts to isolate her from both grandchildren and financial decision-making. Ellie's face drained of color. The judge flipped through the pages, his expression turning colder with each document. After a long pause, he looked up and said, "This petition is denied, and frankly, it borders on elder abuse." Ellie gasped. Her lawyer closed his eyes. Her parents froze. Marcus bowed his head politely, victorious without a trace of gloating. After the ruling outside the courthouse, Ellie tried to rush to Daniel. "Daniel, please, baby, listen." But Daniel stepped back, not angry, not cruel, just finally awake. "Stop," he said quietly. "I need time. I need space. And you need to face what you've done." Ellie looked from him, to me, to Marcus, to the courthouse steps behind us. For the first time since I met her, Ellie looked small, not powerless, just exposed, a woman whose entire empire was built on manipulation. Finally, she met a wall she couldn't climb, and the truth was simple. She didn't lose because I fought hard. She lost because she never imagined I'd fight at all. Life has a strange way of resetting itself once you stop asking people to value you. 2 months after the court case, I stood at the edge of a long driveway lined with oak trees, their branches stretching overhead like they were guarding a secret. At the end of that driveway sat a place no one, not even Daniel, knew about. A place Robert bought for us before he passed, a place he never had the chance to move into, a place I wasn't ready to touch. Until now. A $7 million mansion sitting quietly among rolling hills, overlooking a lake that shimmered like glass whenever the sun kissed it. When I unlocked the front door, the echo of my footsteps filled the grand foyer. Marble floors, sweeping staircase, chandeliers that caught the light like diamonds. For the first time in years, I felt something expand inside me. Not loneliness, not fear, not pain. Space. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to finally be myself without shrinking for anyone. I walked room to room, touching the walls, running my fingers along the mantels, whispering, "We finally made it, Robert." A new life takes shape. With Marcus's help, I hired a team to freshen the place, a gardener to revive the rose terrace, a contractor to update the kitchen, a decorator to keep Robert's favorite style, classic wood and warm gold accents. Every day, something changed. Every day, the house became more mine. But it wasn't the mansion that healed me. It was what I did with it. A table for the forgotten by spring. I started hosting Sunday dinners, not for people who shared my blood, but for people who shared my heart. Women from the church, whose kids never visited elderly neighbors living alone, widows navigating fresh grief, retired teachers and nurses who spent decades giving but received so little in return. Some brought casseroles, some brought stories, some just brought their presence, and every seat at my dinner table was filled. We laughed, we prayed, we danced to old soul records in the living room, and for the first time in years, I felt like part of a family, one I built with my own hands. The grandkids Daniel started visiting slowly, not out of guilt, not because Ellie told him to, but because he wanted to. One day, he brought the kids, tiny hands, wide smiles, running through the mansion halls like they'd lived there their whole lives. My granddaughter jumped onto my lap and said, "Grandma, this is the happiest house I've ever been in." I felt my throat tighten. Ellie, meanwhile, chose to stay away. Daniel didn't push it, neither did I. Some bridges don't burn. They just quietly stop being used. The quiet evening that changed everything. One evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the lake. The sunset poured gold across the water. A warm breeze carried the scent of jasmine, And I realized I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't hoping Daniel would choose me. I wasn't grieving the family I used to have. I was living, fully, bravely, on my own terms. Robert once told me, "One day you'll understand your own strength." Standing there, watching the sun dip behind the hills, I finally did. A community grows word spread. People started reaching out. Older women, caregivers, grandmothers, friends of friends, asking how I rebuilt my life. So I started something small that became something meaningful. The Open Door Circle, a weekly gathering for anyone who needed companionship, resources, legal guidance, or just a safe place to breathe. Marcus volunteered to speak about elder rights. Local nonprofits partnered with me. Church members donated meals. And little by little, I became more than just a mother who had been pushed out. I became a woman who opened her home and her heart to people who needed it most. The truth about family. One evening after everyone left and the house grew quiet again, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and whispered to the night, "Family isn't who you're born to. Family is who refuses to shut the door on you." And in that moment, surrounded by peace, warmth, and everything Ellie tried to take, I felt truly free. 6 months after Christmas, the Christmas that broke me and rebuilt me, I found myself standing in the backyard of my mansion, watching fireflies blink across the lawn like tiny lanterns. The air was warm, soft, gentle in a way life hadn't been for a long time. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and sat in my favorite chair, the one facing the lake, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a stillness settle into my bones. Not loneliness, not regret, just peace. It's strange how peace feels heavier than chaos at first, because you don't know if you're allowed to keep it. But I realized something that evening as the sky turned from orange to deep blue. I had finally stopped begging for a place in a home that didn't want me, and built one where people came because they loved me. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end your life. It ends the version of you that tolerated less than you deserved. And from that ending, something new begins, something stronger, something truer, something yours. I thought about Ellie and all the ways she tried to shrink me, with rules, with guilt, with boundaries disguised as concern. But in the end, she didn't destroy me. She revealed me. She showed me exactly where I stood, and more importantly, where I refused to stay. I looked around at the mansion glowing softly in the evening light, at the rooms filled with laughter from Sunday dinners, at the women who found comfort at my table, at the grandchildren who now ran freely through halls they called Grandma's Castle. And I whispered a quiet truth into the warm summer air. You are never too old to take your power back. Not too old to draw a boundary. Not too old to start over. Not too old to build something beautiful from the ashes of disrespect. People think age makes you weak, but age gives you something far greater. Clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about who matters. Clarity about who deserves a seat at your table and who doesn't deserve to stand on your porch. I turned toward the camera of my mind, toward the women watching, listening, living through their own storms, and I said, family is not determined by blood. Family is determined by respect, and no holiday, no tradition, no DNA gives anyone the right to shut you out of your own worth. Then I asked the question I ask you now. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you ignored the way they kept breaking you? And what happened when you finally walked away? Because somewhere out there, another woman is standing on a porch in the cold, wondering if she matters. And your story, yes, your story, might be the one that helps her step back, turn around, and choose herself. If this journey touched you, if you've ever been pushed aside, if you've ever rebuilt your life from broken pieces, tell me in the comments. Share your story. Let someone else feel less alone tonight. And if you want more stories like this, stories about rising, reclaiming, rebuilding, hit subscribe, share this video, and keep walking with me. Because this channel isn't just about betrayal, it's about becoming whole again. And I promise you, the door here will never close on you.